Hi there, I'm Emily, just an ordinary woman, I suppose, who once believed that if you were loyal enough, good enough, you'd always have a place in your family. I used to think I understood unconditional love until the day I realized I was never really chosen. If you've ever believed your family could never turn their back on you, stay with me till the end of this story. Because what I discovered, well, it changed everything. It all started, believe it or not, with a paper plate. We were at my Aunt Carol's annual summer barbecue. You know the kind. Mismatched lawn chairs, the smell of charcoal and citronella candles, kids screaming as they ran through sprinklers. It was ordinary. I was helping clear away some of the debris, crumpled napkins, and, yes, those flimsy paper plates, when I saw it. Tucked beneath a half-eaten hot dog bun was a save-the-date card. Elegant script, a picture of a happy couple I didn't immediately recognize. Then my eyes focused. The groom, okay, vaguely familiar, but the bride, that was my younger sister, Hannah. My breath just stopped. Hannah was getting married. I squinted at the date. It was only 6 weeks away. 6 weeks. And I, her older sister, the one who'd practically raised her after Dad died, was finding out via a discarded piece of party trash. A wave of something cold and sharp washed over me, right there in the middle of the laughter and the sunshine. I looked around. My mom was chatting animatedly with my Uncle Joe. My cousin Sarah was showing off pictures on her phone. Hannah was nowhere to be seen, probably off with her friends, the ones who apparently knew. Everyone was smiling, carrying on as if it was just another Saturday. And in that moment, a chasm opened up. I felt utterly, completely alone, adrift in a sea of familiar faces that suddenly felt like strangers. The noise of the party faded into a dull roar in my ears. It was just me, the paper plate, and this shattering secret. A deep, quiet hurt began to bloom in my chest, followed by a flicker of anger, so quiet it was almost invisible, even to me, but it was there. How could they? How could she? My mind, it just started replaying scenes like an old movie reel. All those years. Hannah had always been the fragile one, the one who needed constant reassurance. I remembered countless nights, me sitting on the edge of her bed, her sobbing into my shoulder after some high school drama, a boyfriend who'd been cruel, a friendship that had soured. I'd be on the phone with her for hours, sometimes well past midnight, talking her down from panic attacks, her voice small and shaky, mind steady and calm, even when I was exhausted from my own day. "It's okay, hon," I'd say. "We'll figure it out. I'm here. And the money, oh man, the money. I'm so sorry, but my rent is due and I'm a little short." It was never a little. It was always a few hundred here, a couple hundred there, just until I get my next paycheck, she'd promise. I never really kept track, never expected it back. She was my sister. You help your sister. I'd dip into my own savings, the money I was trying to squirrel away for a down payment on a tiny condo, or maybe that solo trip I'd always dreamed of. I'd tell myself it was fine. She needed it more. Breakups were the worst. Each one felt like the end of the world to her. I'd be the one to pick up the pieces, to listen to the same story of betrayal and heartbreak, over and over. I'd make her tea, let her cry it out, tell her she was strong, that she'd get through it. I helped her move out of 2 different apartments shared with boyfriends who, in hindsight, were probably just as tired of the drama as I was starting to become, though I'd never have admitted it then. I remembered how, after Dad passed away so suddenly, Mom just crumbled. And I, barely out of my teens, stepped up. I became the quiet support, the invisible scaffolding holding everything together. I made sure the bills were paid, that Mom ate, that Hannah got to school. I put my own grief, my own dreams on hold. For them. Because that's what family did. Or so I believed. And now this. A wedding, a major life event, and I was... what? An afterthought. Not even that. I was completely, deliberately excluded. All those sacrifices, all that unwavering support, it felt like it had been tallied up on some invisible ledger and found wanting. Worthless. The heartbreak wasn't just about the wedding. It was the sudden, stark realization that the love, the care, the loyalty, it had all been flowing in one direction. From me to them. And nothing, absolutely nothing was coming back. The disillusionment was a bitter pill. It was like I'd been pouring water into a sieve my whole life and only just noticed. I couldn't let it rest. The image of that save-the-date card was burned into my mind. Later that evening, when the party sounds had died down and I was back in the quiet of my own small apartment, the silence amplifying the turmoil inside me, I picked up the phone. My hand was actually shaking a little. I dialed Mom's number. She answered on the third ring, her voice still a little too bright, a little too forced from the day's festivities. "Emily, hi, honey. Did you have a good time today?" I took a breath. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "is Hannah getting married?" Silence. A tiny, loaded pause that spoke volumes. Then, "Oh, well, yes, dear, she is." Just like that. So casual. As if she were telling me Hannah had decided to paint her kitchen yellow. And I wasn't going to be told? The question hung there, heavy and raw. "Oh, Emily, don't be like that." Her voice shifted, a touch of that familiar maternal dismissal, the kind that always made me feel small, like my feelings were an inconvenience. "It's just, well, you know, Hannah." She wanted something very simple, very small. Just immediate family and a few close friends. Immediate family. The words echoed in my head. Was I not immediate family? "Mom, I'm her sister." "Of course you are, dear. But you know, schedules are so complicated, and with you living in the city and your job, she just didn't want to put any pressure on anyone." It all came together rather quickly, you see. Lies. They were such flimsy, transparent lies. Hannah still lived at home. My schedule? I would have moved heaven and earth. Didn't want to put pressure on anyone. That was the line that did it. It wasn't an oversight. It wasn't a mistake. This was a conscious decision. So I wasn't forgotten, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I was deliberately left out. "Emily, that's not a very nice way to put it." There was a defensive edge to her voice now. "It's not about you. It's just simpler this way. Simpler." And then it hit me, the full, devastating truth. I was the easy one, the one who never made a fuss, the one who always understood, always accommodated, the one they knew wouldn't cause a scene, wouldn't demand an explanation, wouldn't make them feel guilty. I was the path of least resistance. It was easier to exclude me than to navigate the complexities of, well, of what? Of including me? A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. It wasn't the explosive rage you see in movies. It was a slow burn, a deep, simmering anger that felt almost like grief. It was the realization that their indifference, their casual dismissal, was a betrayal far deeper than any outright hostility could ever be. They hadn't forgotten me. They had simply decided I wasn't necessary. I was invisible, not because I was hiding, but because they had chosen not to see me. "Okay, Mom," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion churning inside. "I understand." "Good, dear. I knew you would." Her relief was palpable, and it was like another twist of the knife. I hung up the phone. The silence in my apartment was deafening. I understood. All right, I understood perfectly. The last thread, the one I'd been clinging to for so long, the belief that deep down they valued me, it had just been snipped. Cleanly. Irrevocably. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call Hannah or anyone else to demand answers I already knew I wouldn't get, or at least not honest ones. Instead, a strange sort of calm settled over me. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was a decision. I walked over to my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating my face in the darkened room. I opened a browser and typed in flights. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and then, almost without conscious thought, I typed Iceland. Why Iceland? I don't know. Maybe it was the pictures I'd seen of its stark, volcanic landscapes, its glaciers, its vast, empty spaces. It felt like a place where the silence wouldn't be accusing, but cleansing. A place as far removed from the suffocating sweetness of family obligation as I could imagine. I found a one-way ticket for the following week. The price was surprisingly reasonable, almost like a sign. I clicked book. No drama, no tearful goodbyes packed into suitcases. Just a quiet click, and it was done. The next few days were a blur of quiet efficiency. I put in for an extended leave of absence from my job at the nonprofit. My boss, bless her, was surprisingly understanding when I vaguely mentioned needing personal time. I think she sensed something was deeply wrong, but she didn't pry. I arranged for a friend to water my plants. I packed a single suitcase, mostly with warm layers, my hiking boots, a couple of books I'd been meaning to read. Minimalist, just like my life. I didn't tell my family. What was there to say? By the way, since I'm not invited to the wedding, I'm going to Iceland indefinitely? It felt petty, and honestly, I was beyond that. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about me. The morning I left for the airport, the city was just waking up. A soft gray light filtered through my apartment window. I took one last look around at the small space that had been my refuge for so many years. There was a pang, a bittersweet sadness, but it was quickly overshadowed by a flicker of something else. Hope? Relief? As the plane took off, lifting me up and away from Boston, away from the life I knew, I felt a profound sense of unburdening. It was like shedding a heavy cloak I hadn't even realized I'd been wearing. Iceland, it sounded like ice and land, harsh, elemental, real. It was a metaphor, I realized, for what I needed, a stripping away of all the pretense, all the illusions. A journey into a kind of emotional wilderness to see if I could find myself again, or perhaps for the first time. There was a quiet relief in the hum of the engines, a bittersweet ache for what was lost, but also, undeniably, a spark of anticipation for a new, unwritten beginning. I'd been in Iceland for about 3 weeks. I'd rented a small cabin near Vik with its black sand beaches and dramatic basalt columns. The solitude was immense. Some days, the silence was so profound it felt like I could hear the earth breathing. I hiked for hours, the wind whipping my hair, the landscape stark and unyielding, yet breathtakingly beautiful. It was harsh, yes, but honest. There was no pretense here. The volcanic rock, the glaciers, the unpredictable weather, it all just was. And in that, I found a strange comfort. I wasn't trying to be anything for anyone. I was just being. I deliberately disconnected. My phone was mostly off, tucked away in a drawer. I checked emails once every few days, just to make sure the world hadn't ended at my old job. No calls from family, not that I expected any. They probably hadn't even noticed I was gone. Or if they had, they assumed I was just being Emily. Quiet, undemanding, out of sight, out of mind. Then one evening, I decided to connect to the spotty cabin Wi-Fi, mostly to download a new book. An email notification popped up. It wasn't from anyone I knew directly. The subject line was just, "Thought you might want to see this." Curious, I clicked. It was a link to a video sharing site. The video was shaky, clearly filmed on a phone at a wedding reception. Hannah's wedding reception. My heart gave a strange little thump. I almost closed it. What was the point? But something made me press play. The video opened on a brightly lit dance floor, music playing, people awkwardly dancing. Then, the camera panned to the speeches. Hannah was beaming, holding hands with her new husband, a guy named Kevin, I think. Her best friend, a woman I vaguely remembered from high school named Chloe, stepped up to the microphone. She looked a little unsteady. Chloe started her speech normally enough, yet a few cliches about love and happiness. Then her voice changed. It got louder, sharper. "And I wish Hannah and Kevin all the happiness they deserve," she slurred slightly, especially since they found it while Kevin was still engaged to my cousin Sarah, and Hannah was supposedly her best friend. The music screeched to a halt. A collective gasp went through the room. You could see Hannah's face go white, her smile frozen in a horrified rictus. Kevin looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him. Chloe wasn't done. She launched into a rambling, tearful, alcohol-fueled exposé of how Hannah had systematically pursued Kevin, knowing he was with Chloe's cousin, how they'd been sneaking around for months. The picture-perfect facade, the one they'd so carefully constructed, the one I wasn't deemed worthy enough to witness, just crumbled. In public, spectacularly. I watched the whole chaotic, cringeworthy scene unfold. The shouting, the tears, Hannah eventually running from the room, her perfect white dress trailing behind her. And how did I feel? I expected to feel something. Vindicated, maybe? A little schadenfreude? But honestly, there was nothing. No joy, no satisfaction, just a kind of somber recognition. Falsehoods, I thought, they always fall apart sooner or later. You can build your pretty castle on a foundation of lies, but it won't stand. It was a mess, a truly awful public mess. And all I felt was a distant, detached sadness for the whole sorry situation. The truth, as they say, has a way of prevailing, even if it's messy and painful. My own quiet pain suddenly felt clean in comparison. It wasn't long after that wedding video fiasco that my phone, which I'd started keeping charged just in case of emergencies, began to light up. First, a text from an unknown number, which turned out to be my Aunt Carol. "Emily, dear, where are you? Things are difficult here. We need you. Need me. Not, are you okay? Or we miss you. But we need you." Then came the voicemails. My cousin Sarah, sounding frantic. "Emily, it's a disaster. Hannah's locked herself in her room. Mom's beside herself. Can you please come home? You'll know what to do. Even a hesitant, tearful message from Hannah herself, the first direct contact in months. I messed up so bad. Everyone's so mad. Mom said you're away? Can you just call me, please? I need you. The calls and texts kept coming, a barrage of desperate pleas. They wanted me to come home. They wanted me to fix things, to smooth things over, to be the calm center in their storm, the role I'd always played. I listened to the messages, read the texts, a growing clarity dawning within me. It was painful, yes, but also strangely empowering. They didn't miss me, Emily. They missed what I did for them. They missed the convenience of my silent support, my ability to absorb their chaos and somehow make it manageable. They missed their emotional shock absorber, their fixer, their scapegoat when things got too real. This time, I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't text back reassurances. I didn't book a flight home to clean up their mess. For the first time in my life, I chose silence. I chose to let them sit with the consequences of their own actions. It was a strange feeling, this quiet refusal. It wasn't about revenge. I was long past wanting that. It was about self-preservation. It was an awakening to my own worth, a quiet understanding that I deserved more than to be a utility, a function in their lives. My silence wasn't empty. It was filled with the newfound strength of my own boundaries. Weeks turned into a couple of months. The frantic calls had dwindled, replaced by a sort of strained, bewildered silence from their end. I was still in Iceland, though I'd moved to a small guest house in Reykjavik, thinking about my next steps. One afternoon, my phone rang. It was my mother. I hesitated then, for reasons I still don't fully understand. I answered. Emily? Her voice was quiet, subdued. None of the usual forced cheerfulness or defensive justifications. Hi, Mom, I said, equally quiet. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end. It wasn't the silence of someone waiting for an attack or preparing a defense. It was an empty silence. A silence that seemed to acknowledge the vast space that had opened up between us. Finally, she said, her voice barely a whisper. We really made a mess of things, didn't we? No excuses, no spin. Just that raw, quiet admission. Yes, I said, you did. Another silence, longer this time. I could almost feel her on the other end, grappling with something. Maybe, just maybe, a dawning realization. Why didn't you say something? She asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice, a hint of pain. All those years, if you were unhappy, if you felt unseen, why were you always so quiet? And there it was, the crux of it all. I took a slow breath, the cold Icelandic air filling my lungs, feeling strangely grounding. Mom, I said, my voice gentle, without accusation, without bitterness, just a simple, profound truth. I was there, all along. I was always there. You just didn't see me. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't empty. It felt heavy, full of unspoken things, of years of unintentional neglect, of a blindness that had cost us both so much. I didn't need her to apologize, not anymore. I didn't need her to understand everything. In that moment, with those few words, I think something in me finally, truly let go. It was a deep sorrow. Yes, for the family I thought I had, for the connection I'd craved. But woven through it was an undeniable thread of liberation. I had spoken my truth, quietly, simply, and I had been heard, perhaps for the very first time. A few days later, before I finally booked my flight onward, not back to Boston, but to somewhere new, somewhere I hadn't yet decided, I sat down with a plain postcard. I wrote a short, simple letter. No accusations, no rehashing of hurts. Just a few lines, wishing them peace, wishing them the ability to find their own way through the mess they'd created. I told them I was okay, that I was finding my own path. Before I mailed it, I took one last photo with my phone. I'd been on a walk earlier that day, by a lake called Tjörnin, right in the city. It was winter now, and the edges of the lake were frozen, the air crisp and clean. There was a lone, empty park bench facing the water, dusted with a light layer of snow. It looked peaceful, solitary, complete in its own way. I snapped a picture of that empty chair, the still, frozen lake stretching out beyond it. I didn't post it online for them to see immediately. It was more for me. A silent symbol of my absence, yes, but not an absence of anger or bitterness. It was an absence filled with a newfound presence in my own life. An empty chair, waiting not for someone else to fill it, but perhaps signifying the space I had finally claimed for myself. I mailed the letter, Then I deleted their numbers from my phone, not out of spite, but as a final act of severing the unhealthy ties. I was moving forward, into my own life, carrying a quiet strength, a poignant sense of closure, and a bittersweet freedom that was all my own. The snow in Iceland felt clean, and for the first time in a very long time, so did I. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't forgiving those who hurt you, it's forgiving yourself for staying too long in places where you were never truly chosen. It took me a long time to understand that, to see that my silence, my willingness to be the easy one, had enabled a dynamic that was slowly eroding my own spirit. If you've ever found yourself being the only one holding a relationship together, the only one pouring in the effort, the care, the love, remember, choosing yourself is not selfish. It's not an act of abandonment. It's the final act of kindness, the ultimate act of self-respect. It's acknowledging your own worth, even when those closest to you have failed to see it. My journey was a quiet one, a silent kind of revenge, if you can even call it that. It wasn't about making them pay. It was about me finally getting paid, in peace, in self-worth, in freedom. If this story touched you, if any part of it resonated with your own experiences, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and honestly, it helps to know we're not alone in these journeys. And if you want to hear more real, heartfelt stories like this, stories of navigating betrayal and finding your way back to yourself, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We've got a lot more to share. You know, sometimes giving is part of healing too. If you feel moved to support the channel, you can use the Super Thanks feature. Every little bit helps us continue to bring these stories to light. Because sometimes, healing begins simply by being heard. Thank you for listening.